Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier and I made this edit. A few of you over on TikTok asked me how I made this, so I am here to tell you how I made this. I've never made a tutorial type video before, but I'm going to do my best to give you a better answer than divine intervention. And without further ado, let's hop right into the meat and potatoes. This is my timeline. I use Davinci Resolve to edit. Now I hear you. Davinci Resolve, that junk is confusing as frick. Doesn't Davinci Resolve work with nodes? I don't know how that works. Well, allow me to break it down for you a little bit. In your timeline, you typically have clips and layers to your video, right? But when it comes to Davinci Resolve and working in Fusion, inside of each one of these clips is where the real magic happens, using what we call nodes. Think of nodes as like a conveyor belt for your media. Right here, I have a regular background node. This is connected straight into our media out, which is our final product, what plays throughout the length of the clip. Say I wanted to modify this background in some way. Say I wanted to make it move to the right. I could create a transform node, take our conveyor belt, make our background go into the transform node, and make the output of our transform node go into our final product. With the feed of our background node going into the transform is going to modify the footage, make an output of what the transform did to the original background, and make it display in our final product. So for example, if I wanted to make this background move to the right, I could select our transform node, which has the exact same output as our background node. So I can change the color of our background node and it changes what shows up in our transform node. If I select this transform node, say go to 0 frames, which is the start of our clip, I can create a keyframe over here in our inspector on the right, saying that between frame 0 and frame 40, I can create another keyframe and modify the position of our background. So between keyframe 0 and keyframe 40, I want you to move from the center over here to the right. It does exactly that. Say you wanted to add an image over top of this background. From our media pool, I'm going to grab this image, drag it into our nodes to create an additional node. To add this to our timeline, I'm going to create, don't be scared, but yet another node called merge. This allows our conveyor belt to stay the same while adding an additional input to the conveyor belt to be placed into our final product. So we're going to go ahead and feed that into our line and take the output of our image here and connect this to the top of the merge node. So now, as you can see, our image is added into this point in our conveyor belt. So from frame 0 to frame 40, we can still see our background moves to the right in our final product. But you may be wondering, how is our image not moving? That is because throughout the flow of our conveyor belt, there's nothing changing the properties of our image here. This is simply overlaid on top of what we had already. Now say I bring this same transform node, which is bringing our background from the center to the right, in front of where we have our image being inserted into our conveyor belt. You can see that transform node moves everything behind it, including our inserted image. Things that you can do with nodes are just about endless. And I know this is a short and to the point tutorial, but there are plenty of videos online that explain it in much more depth. I highly recommend Wampus, a YouTube channel that I've watched a lot of tutorials for to learn how to do these types of things. I hope this gives you a bit of understanding how nodes work, but back to the edit. Starting at the beginning, the first thing I have is a freeze frame of where our video begins. I have that overlaid on top of a simple, fun little background that I made consisting of a plasma node keyframe to make it move, color corrected to make it change color over time, and I put a mosaic blur over top just to stylize, lower the opacity a little bit over a black background, and you get our final result. Next, on top of that, start off with a blank background. We have our Jade Station Media Player PNG, which I realized later I kind of fucked this up because I didn't line it up correctly with the thing in my final video, but that can just be our little secret, right? All right, moving on. This is just squished by transform node, make it fit the screen better. And then we have our still frame here squished properly over our media player. And this is keyframed with a lot of motion blur to stretch out and pop up like that. Add a shadow and a little bit of camera shake. And you have that final product laid over our background. This adjustment clip houses our little mouse animation. I found this PNG online. Set the pivot point. This is just over a blank background. This is animated over top everything else that we have so far. Add some graphs, some motion blur. You've got that mouse movement. This little sound effect for the click as well. Our circle animation for when it does click. This consists of a colored background node with a bunch of circular masks animated in sync with one another, a color correction node to make it change color over time, transform node to make it smaller, I guess, by 0.08, very important. And then for the glowish effect I have going on here, I have a merge node which takes the output of everything else here, splits it up into 2 tracks. This bottom one going through 2 resize nodes back into our background merge node, and this one going into a glow into 2 more resize nodes to make it have that blurry kind of messed up effect overlaid on top of what we had before with apply mode color to make it look like that, simply put. But yeah, that's our circle animation. Then in here we have our Jade Station media player image, as well as our first chunk of the edit here in like actual video form, overlaid on top of each other and just keyframe to move closer in frame. Brings us to our next part, which consists of just our source footage from the Sackboy Big Adventure trailer. On top of that, over top a black background, we have this that I got from a Frutiger Metro asset pack, which I can leave in the description down below. This is transformed and used as a mask over top a gradient background to take the cutout of the plant animation and make it a different color. On top of that, I have a mosaic blur node with a rectangle mask on top to move along the path of the floral animation to give it that like pixelated as it's coming in kind of look. Here's our text node that I have moving along our simple little curved path here, with another mask on top to kind of make it fade in as it's moving along the path. On top of that, I have this simple outline node. I genuinely forgot where I got this. I'm sorry, you could probably look it up online, but this was just a text setting I somehow acquired, which makes that colored outline around the text. We have another mosaic blur node, kind of doing the same thing as it did on the floral animation. I have a shadow behind it just to add some depth. That layered into our floral animation into a drop shadow, just to give it a bit more depth. The filter that I used over top most of this edit consists of a adjustment clip that grabs like whatever clip is underneath it in your timeline. We have this split up going into a super modulation node, which I also got online. I can leave that in the description below, which gives it that cool wavy look. That into the same kind of thing that we used earlier with the resize nodes, and the glow over top of each other gives us that final VHS sort of look. Moving into this transition, I have to remember how I did this. Starting from the bottom up, this is our first big fusion composition, which is composed starting off with a regular purple background, another black background layered on top to make our floor. These dots are another image I just found online. It's a simple like fade kind of thing. I don't know why there's a resize node here, honestly. You don't need that. This is just moved over top of everything else we have, flipped around to have our polka dots in the background. These are 2 more images I just found online of different skylines. These are all adjusted and layered over backgrounds to give us our skyline. Next, we have this paint splatter that I animated to kind of pop in. Moving on to our speakers. Similar to our click animation, these are just radial gradient backgrounds with a bunch of circle masks over top to kind of make it look like a sphere. The same thing copied a few times and put into different places, as well as animated to pop up. And lastly, for this wave, consists of another 2 backgrounds with a couple polygon masks to make the shape, as well as a couple masks that move over time to make it fade in a couple simple outlines, and that's how you get your freaking wave. Throughout the making of this edit, Fusion kind of like clicked for me in a sense. So a lot of this is still unoptimized, but you'll see later on that it gets better. Next up, consisting of our Sackboy layers for this section of the transition, we have our grayscale Sackboy, which just consists of rotoscoped original footage, as well as a color corrector attached to an Eclipse node to make the change of color to black and white. Behind that, we have our source footage again, with a couple masks to make it fade on the edges to blend in with the background, as well as this same no tree here to make our text, overlaid on top with the same masks to make it blend with the background the same amount. And underneath that, we have a reflection on the floor, which consists of our rotoscoped original footage, a faded rectangle mask to cut his head off, which is overlaid or masked on top of a gray background node to give our outline of Sackboy, just so as it fades, it doesn't fade to black, but to gray. Over top that, we have our same rotoscoped footage and same faded rectangle flipped upside down and with the same ellipse color fade thing that we had before, which again, a lot of this is unnecessary. And you can't even see the top of his head anyway in the reflection, but the line does not concern myself with that. Over top these four, we have an adjustment clip with a couple transform nodes as our final camera, which includes the zoom out and swipe to the left to make that transition to our next clip. Over top all that, I have that same filter that's just adjusted to the scene just by eye to make it look better, in my opinion. This consists of the transition I used in between the different color scenes. This is just a lot more colored background nodes with rectangle masks moving left to right with motion blur, just to make that swipe of the camera in our adjustment layers a lot more smooth to look at, which is the same for all these other transitions I have, just in different orientations to match the camera movement. The rest of these scenes kind of have the same formula where I make the background, I make our rotoscoped Sackboy footage, and just a couple overlays. This yellow scene is still pretty simple so far. It gets so much worse. Starting off with a yellow background, we have dots again, moved and changed color. This star I got from that same Frutiger Metro asset pack. I used this star, moved it over a copy of itself to make the inside of it transparent. Same with this second star that's in the background with white shadows underneath. These are both animated to spin over the length of the clip. Over top that, we have a black and white image of a city that I got from the asset pack, moved over top, and is animated from right to left to match the camera movement, make it a bit more smooth. Give it a shout out for some depth. On top of that, we have our black floor. There's just another background moved down. And lastly, we have this sound wave video that's animated from right to left as well, with a bit of a fade at the bottom, just on top of a colored background. And that's the end of that one, really. With the same kind of transition we saw earlier, that brings us to the green section, which is honestly my favorite. I just love the way the gears look in this one. It's so green. Again, we have our filter that goes over top everything. We have our camera movement adjustment clip in here with our rotoscoped Sackboy footage. Originally he doesn't move, but I gave him a bit of a movement path to make it look like he came up from below. And attached to that, I have another star PNG behind him, just to really give him that spotlight of the scene. That and a nice shadow consists of our Sackboy footage. And then starting with our green background, of course, we have our gradient green with some dots over top, another splat image keyframe to pop out like that. In this Fusion comp, we have one gear going behind our buildings in the back, which is just keyframe to rotate in sync with the other two that we have in front of everything. So it looks like they're actually spinning each other, when in reality, they're not real and just images. These are both blurred a bit just to give it a bit of like foreground kind of depth. This closest gear is like over top our Sackboy footage, connecting to the gear which is behind the buildings, which I think is really cool. Anyway, a couple green drop shadows, and that's how those gears work. Next up is our buildings, which consists of a couple images of our black and white buildings that I just cut out singular pieces of, and I moved them all in sync with a little bit of offset so the buildings kind of fan out in the way that they do. Also moving downward to match the camera movement. Lastly, for the green zone, we have another video that came from that asset pack with a little bit of a fade on the sides, just because I felt like it, and adjusted into that corner. Pretty simple. but there's that. We have another transition into our pink area, which also consists of our filter and some fancy camera movement. Taking a look into our background, we start off again with another gradient. And for the life of me, throughout trying to make this, I could not find online just a PNG of this like faded circle kind of polka dot pattern. I ended up just figuring out how to make this polka dot pattern myself.
Damn!
Now, I know I know this is extremely messy. This, again, is just another background node with a little circle mask on top of it, but with one background node, about 1,000 duplicate nodes, and a few transforms. It looks complicated, but it's just a bunch of circles placed in the polka dot pattern. For our white polka dots in the top right over here, I have that pattern I made going into a dent node, and this is just keyframed to move, or this is just keyframed to get bigger over time, to have that like wave look that it has. Next thing in our background is this wave image I found overlaid onto another gradient background positioned in the back there. We have this flower PNG that I found onto another gradient background, moved onto our background. So many backgrounds. This video, again, was from that same asset pack that I grabbed, just cut to have only one of the two chains that are rotating on top of yet another background. And this is just moved to slide a bit in frame, just to give it some more movement in the back. All right, same with these two. I gave our chain a pink shadow to make it a bit more distinct from the rest of the background. This is a vinyl PNG that I found online with a color corrector node and a circle mask just to affect the center of the vinyl. I made it match the color scheme. This is just keyframed to spin throughout the length of the clip. Right behind that, we have right behind that, we have two of that same polka dot circle pattern that I made, just one being pink and rotating one way, and one being black rotating the other way. And then we have our black background that makes our floor. On top of that, we have our rotoscoped Sackboy footage, the real one and the reflection on the bottom, which I also noticed his head is cut off here too. And on top of that, to make our speakers in the foreground, these are two more assets I got from that Frutiger Metro pack, just moved into the corners of our frame with a white shadow behind them, and that makes the entirety of our pink section. Moving on to the blue section, this is where I feel like I really got a good grip on working in Fusion. This, again, has our filter and our camera, but starting with our background, you know the drill here. Gradient background, dots on top, bit of a glow to make it look different. We have this blue star image that I gave shadows to and moved over top of our background, but this time using this corner position node along with our buildings in the background to give it that perspective from above. The next thing we have in here is this blacked out building silhouette that I gave that same corner positioning node to give it that tilt. One output of that is put right above the stars. Next, we have another appearance of this soundbar asset that I have put over a blue background and adjusted to the right side of our frame is put over top there. Next, we have the black and white buildings in front, given a shadow, that same corner positioning, and layered over top of everything else we have so far. The last asset we have in here is this wave animation, which I once again put over a gradiented background, gave it a shadow, and positioned it in our frame, layered that over everything else. But a keen eye may notice, hey, wait, that doesn't look the same. And on top of that, we have the same output from our building silhouette earlier, layered on top of everything else with a rectangle mask cutting off the bottom part, so we just see the part that layers over top of the wave animation. Same kind of thing I used for the upper section of our soundbar to make it above the wave. I grabbed the soundbar output, threw it in front again with a rectangle mask over the top, so this stays over the wave animation but still stays under the buildings in the back. Next, with our Sackboy footage, after a hang of things, we have our rotoscoped original footage split into 3 different parts, giving our silhouette of the gray background, 2 overlaying it back on top of the gray background with our fading rectangle mask to chop off that top part of his head, even though again you can't see it in the final product, but we're not going to talk about that. Our third output is our base footage, and our shadow is aligned with the corner positioning node because of the perspective that the camera's at. I lined up his feet so the shadow looks a bit better, opposed to what it would look like without the corner positioning node, where only one of his feet would match up and the other would be 1,000 feet apart. So that makes our Sackboy in reflection, changing the color to our black and white scale. Next, how I made this pillar. I started off with a blank background and merged 3 backgrounds on top of that with a slight change of color and some corner positioning. Gives the illusion of a 3D pillar. I gave that a shadow to make it stand out from the background. Overlaid our Sackboy on top with a polygon mask to cut off the reflection when the floor ends on the pillar. That is animated to come up from the bottom of the frame as the camera moves upward. And lastly, over top of that, we have the same 2 assets from the background, the wave and the soundbar. This soundbar has the same positioning as the background, so it overlays on top of one another perfectly while allowing both waves to still be behind the soundbar. We've got a blue to orange transition into our orange scene. This again consists of our filter and our camera movement. We have the same kind of setup before, original footage, black and white, and have the reflection on the floor. This, like in our green scene, is just another couple assets that I got that I moved on top of backgrounds, changed the color. And then moving on to the fusion page of our orange background, we're starting off with a gradient orange background, and the most important piece of this composition is this PNG image that I got of some light rays that I adjusted and keyframed to rotate in the background. Threw that over a gradient background, gave it a shadow, merged it onto our original background. Next, we have this paint splatter PNG adjusted to the top left corner of our frame, overlaid onto the rest of our background with the output of these rotating light rays as a mask to cut it so it's in line with the other orange light rays in the background. On top of that, we have the same fading dots image adjusted to the right and animated to slide in once again on top of a background to change the color, and onto the rest of our background with that same light ray mask over top. Same thing here, we have another paint splatter PNG put onto the mask of a white background, merged with the rest with the light ray mask over top to cut it out. Next, we have this melty text effect that I made that you can barely see on purpose. I watched a tutorial on kind of how to do this because I thought it would be cool, but it didn't look the way I wanted to, so I kind of just lowered the opacity and called it a day. But this consists of our original Sackboy text with a black and orange simple outline adjusted to match our camera POV, and then one output of the text is put into a displace node. And I then just made it faded because I didn't like how it looked and called it a day. Throw that on top with the same light ray mask and another output from our original text on top of itself later on to further hide the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. Next, on top of that, we have our last paint splatter. Same thing, moved it to where I wanted it in the frame, added another light ray mask over top, and added it to our background. Next, I found this floral PNG online. That placed over another gradiented background to make our cutout, added an orange shadow, layered that on top of the rest of our background, grabbed that same light ray mask, and put it over top. Next, for these speakers and the star in the middle, we have those source pieces both from our asset pack. Grab the star, change the color a little bit to match the color scheme, laid that over top of our speakers with just a bit of rotation animation throughout the length of the clip, merged the both of those together, moved it so it would overlay directly behind Sackboy when he got to the top of his pedestal here in our original footage, and merged that on top of the rest of our background with that same light ray mask. And to top it all off, another black background for our floor. And bang! That is the orange section complete. Next is our orange to purple transition. And because this piece of source footage of Sackboy, he's floating, I thought it would be fun to have the floor not below him. So I added that that rotation in the camera movement back in the orange section to move downward into the purple, where the floor is still on the right, having that same reflection technique. Moving into the background composition, I made this one really late at night, so I don't actually remember what's going on here. I can tell you though, I started out with a gradient background, that's for damn sure. This is a silhouetted image of some palm trees I got from that same asset pack. I used this output twice to drag it to 2 different locations on our background. You can see those behind the light rays here. Just a couple rectangle masks to only select one of the 2 palm trees in the image and displace them differently. On top of that, I have the same image that I used before in the pink composition. I have it stretched down and moved to the bottom, overlaid on top of a black background node to frame that part there. Next, we have this alternate light ray image that I flip sideways, masked over another gradient background. Added a bit of a glow and a shadow to make it pop. That is first overlaid once on top of everything we have back here with a rectangle mask, adding a little bit of a fade that you, once again, cannot see in the final product. We have the same faded polka dot pattern, twisted 180 degrees over top a pink background, merged on top of everything else with the same light ray output to the mask of the dots to cut out the in-between places where the light rays are not. And there's a bit of a fade there too. I don't remember how I did that. How the fuck did I do that? Wait. Oh no. Okay, yeah. It was because of the shadow is included in part of the mask. Right now that faded black is counting as part of the mask, so it makes the dots fade out. But for example, if I was to grab the output before the shadow node and put it as a mask on there, it cuts off directly when the light rays cut off. So I did that on purpose. To our black and white floral design, we got these 3 different videos from that same asset pack that I merged together, that I transformed onto our background and merged together so it could be treated as like one entity, one asset. I took that output, put a mask over a black background and a white background separately, put the black background behind everything, and with the same orientation, put the white background on top of it, so they're perfectly overlapping each other, and then added that same light ray mask to the white one on top, so anywhere the light rays were, the white floral design was not. And then you can see the black one through it, with, once again, expertly crafted fade in between. We once again have this vinyl PNG I pulled, color corrected with the same technique, with just a circular mask to only affect the center of the vinyl. Move that over to the right side of our composition, added a hefty shadow. This is another speaker asset I got from that pack, which is thrown behind our CD, merged together, and that is overlaid on top of everything else, covering up our loose ends from the floral design here. Once again, added our black background, shifted it to the right to make our sideways floor. Behind our Sackboy footage, I have this star animation that I made, which just consists of that purple star asset that we have with a mask overlaid on top of itself to cut out the center. This transform node makes it fit our little frame here, and also has our rotation animation. I threw a glow node over top, a color corrector on top of that to make this dark transparent copy we have underneath the original star, brightness node to lower the opacity, and this transform node just changes the X size of the star underneath, so it starts like stretched out and then shrinks to fit the original one. Below that, we have this scan lines node, just for a bit more stylization. The second one is just a copy of the first one, but without this color correction. That makes it darker. So this is our top overlay star. Again, scan lines, merge both of those onto a blank background, give it a pink shadow, one more glow for good measure, and then a brightness node to make it fade towards the end of the animation. I have this same animation overlaid 4 times, just offset a little bit from one another to create those purple stars. Moving on to the teal section, like the others, we have our filter and our camera, which leaves us with that same main footage and reflection and our background. This one also starts off with, you guessed it, a gradient background. Yippee! Over top, we have another paint splatter merged on top of our background that is animated to slide into frame We have this faded polka dot pattern again, flipped to the right, also animated to slide into frame. Next up, our skyline, same sitch, gave it a shadow, also animated to slide into frame. This here consists of the same wave animation I got from that asset pack 3 different times. All of them a bit offset from each other, so they're not in sync in the final product. One of them is backwards or reversed. They're all put through a delta keyer, which is the same thing you would use to like cut out a green screen. I used that on the tan color here so I could customize the color. I put the cutout one on top of a black background and the full one on top of a teal background. Overlaid the black one on top of the teal one to give us the multicolored result. Copy that 2 more times, arrange them in place where I wanted them, and we have our triple wave animation. Next up, this chunk consists of our little butterfly animation, which all comes from this one same PNG I grabbed of a couple butterflies, a couple masks to single out 4 different groups, just for a bit of diversity. We love diversity here. They're all animated on their own different curves with a bit of offset from one another, with the header of the image linked to the actual curvature of the animation. So it automatically turns the image along with the path that is animated on. That process duplicated a couple more times in different places, all on top of blank white backgrounds, all merged together with a shadow underneath, gives us our final butterfly animation. I would make them flap their wings, but I have no idea how the fuck to do that. Next up here, this monstrosity consists of the speakers in our background, which I made myself because I wanted to give another go at it. These are 2 different sets of circles layered on top of each other, which are again just gradiented backgrounds with a lot of circle masks on top to give us all the rings that are present inside of the speakers. And each background is animated in this kind of wave to make them, you know, move. And over top we have this star PNG that is masked over itself a couple times to make its different outlines in the finals design, on top of a black and teal background merged with the rest. And that is also animated to pop up and pulse like that. Next in the composition, to have these teal polka dots show up only in the black section of this speaker, we use our source image again, animated to slide in, layered over top of everything else. And then we grab just our mask from the black background output over here and layer that on top of, oh shit, and lay it over the mask of these teal polka dots, and then our black floor to top it off. Through another transition that leads us to our second to last color composition, filter and camera movement again. We have the same strategy we used to get our monochrome Sackboy with the reflection on the bottom, and then our red composition, a relatively simple one in comparison to the others. Again, you start off with a gradient background, this same floral image from the, I believe the pink composition, a circle mask faded to just show the upper left. I moved that to where I wanted it in frame, overlay it onto a pink background with a glow node to make it pop a little bit in that corner. On top of that, we have this paint splatter in the right corner, which is also animated to pop down into frame. We have our polka dot fade yet again on the right side. We have another appearance of this circular polka dot fade. That is overlaid onto another red and black gradient background with a nice little shadow. Then we have another floral PNG, which I just changed the color of to be black and white. This is also, again, animated to slide in from the left with a red shadow underneath to make it pop in the places that are black in this bottom section here. Next up, we have the composition that consists of our speakers in the top right and the kind of drippy ones, but I made these from just plain black backgrounds and rectangular masks that I gave rounded edges. So it keeps the flat sides, but the rounded bottom. And then I just have those animated with a couple simple outline nodes that follow the mask along the animation. I have that done twice, and then just a few more regular circles with simple outlines to make the remainder 3 speakers that are in the upper right corner. Throw all that with a shadow on top of our existing background, with another black background as our floor, and that makes up for the rest of our red composition. Our last transition is just a bit different from the rest of them because we're not translating the camera like up, down, left, or right, but we're going forward. So I have these circular masks. It's the same strategy, but in circles instead of rectangles. So the transition comes from the inside to the outside. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have this final orange composition, gradient background with another wave asset that I got that I simply changed the color of because it does have some depth to it. I didn't want to get just the outline. Flipped it around, changed the color to match everything else, gave it a shadow, threw it on our background. On top of that, we have our polka dot fade once again, made it a bit bigger and animated it to slide down from the top. We have our polka dot circle again, which is just animated to rotate throughout the length of the clip. That is set on top of a yellow to red gradient background with a shadow on top of everything else. Next, we have our speakers on top, which is just a straight up asset. Moved it to the middle, gave it a shadow. This wavy design once again, flipped upside down onto a black background, and then moved to cover the top part of our frame. Gave it a shadow for some depth, laid it on top of everything else. We have this floral animation asset adjusted to where I wanted it in the frame on a black background on top of everything else. Next up is one chunk of our text. These are almost the same, but just modified and moved to fit nicely in our frame. They're both given simpler outlines. The 1500 is given a glow because you're awesome and you deserve it. Put a shadow on both of those. And lastly, we have the big fella animated to stretch all funny like, with a mosaic blur on top and a shadow behind. And there you have that. And then he blows up and dies. Well, there you have it. That was my take at Frutiger Metro. I learned a lot from making this. I hope you learned a thing or two from me going over it. Let me know what editing style I should try and replicate next. And thanks for watching.
That was easy.